Welcome to Advocate with Dr. Rufus Lowe, where we aspire each and every day to eradicate the silence of good people who allow bad things to happen. And in doing so, we can together provide a new and glorious path forward for all. Our conversation will be based on the teachings of my latest book entitled Shadow Tolerance, Your Guide to Accepting Racial Difference. Shall we begin?
The Vice President and the United States Senate.
We're going to give riot warnings. As soon as the outright is here, we're going to give riot warnings. We're going to try and get compliance, but this is now effectively a riot.
49 hours declaring it a riot.
Cruiser 5 to 50 be advised, Capitol Police 1 advised they're trying to breach and get into the Capitol.
50, I copy. We're about 5 mics out. We're trying to make our way through all this. We have a breach of the Capitol! Breach of the Capitol to the upper level!
Jack, be advised they're requesting additional resources on the east side as they've broken into that window and they're trying to kick it in.
It should be clear to all Americans that we have a very serious left-wing terror threat in our country. Radicals associated with the domestic terror group Antifa that you've heard a lot about lately, and I've heard a lot about them for 10 years. For 10 years. And other far-left extremists have been carrying out a campaign of violence against ICE agents and other officials charged with enforcing federal law. And a great person, a great patriot. In Chicago, in July, approximately a dozen Antifa-aligned militants stormed the ICE facility in Texas and then lured officers out of the building before firing dozens of rounds at police. One Texas officer in the neck, and in Portland, Oregon, Antifa thugs have repeatedly attacked our officers and laid siege to federal property in an attempt to violently stop the execution of federal law. Everything we're doing is very lawful. What they're doing is not lawful. This attack came the very same month that Charlie Kirk was assassinated by a far-left extremist who inscribed the words, "Hey, fascist, catch," meaning catch the bullet, onto the bullet shelf itself. The epidemic of left-wing violence and Antifa-inspired terror has been escalating for nearly a decade.
So what is Antifa? This is a question of proportion and perception. So let's start by saying, introducing Antifa as the lens of fear. In American political imagination, Antifa has become a four-letter word, a shorthand for chaos, riots, and violent resistance, while politicians and pundits alike often invoke it as a existential threat to law and order, equating it to terrorism and anarchy. Yet this image amplified by sensational media coverage and partisan rhetoric, often obscures the deeper reality. When measured against the data on violent extremism here in the United States, the threat posed by Antifa pales in comparison to the organized ideology or the ideologically motivated violence carried out by right-wing supremacy groups. The contrast between perception and reality exposes not only a distorted understanding of domestic terrorism, but also a dangerous political game that weaponizes fear for partisan gain. So, let's start by trying to understand what Antifa is and what it is not. Antifa, in short, or is short for anti-fascist, is not an organization, but a loosely affiliated movement of individuals who oppose fascism or oppose white supremacy and authoritarianism. There are no leaders in this group, no membership roles or official funding channels, while some adherents employ direct action tactics, including vandalism, confrontation, and digital exposure of extremists. The overwhelming majority of Antifa activity revolves around protest and counter mobilization. The single confirmed fatality linked to an Antifa-aligned individual, it occurred in Portland in 2020 when Michael Renault shot a member of the right-wing group Patriot Prayer during a violent clash. This tragic and isolated act, while serious, stands in sharp contrast to the hundreds of murders attributed to far-right extremists over the past 3 decades. So in short, Antifa's primary weapon has been disruption, not mass violence. Its danger lies more in symbolism and perception than in organized lethality. So, next I want to talk about the record of right-wing supremacy and violence as we compare it to Antifa. Well, right-wing supremacy groups, on the other hand, have a long and well-documented history of organized violence. The Ku Klux Klan, neo-Nazis, Boogaloo militias, and other white nationalist networks have been responsible for the vast majority of domestic terror incidents in the modern era. So in our satire, we saw the difference between the two illustrated. According to Anti-Defamation League, or ADL, between 2010 and 2024, over 75% of extremist-related murders in the United States were committed by individuals associated with right or far-right ideologies. Examples abound. The Charleston Church Massacre in 2015, the Charlottesville car attack in 2017, the El Paso Walmart shooting in 2019 targeting Hispanics, and the Buffalo grocery store shooting in 2022 targeting black shoppers, each driven by racial or nationalist hatred. These were not random outbursts, but calculated acts of terror intended to intimidate communities and advance ideological goals. Unlike Antifa's decentralized activism, right-wing supremacy movements are recruiting, they're training, and arming themselves with coordinating online and across state lines. The FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, have repeatedly identified white supremacist violence as the most persistent and lethal domestic terror threat facing our great nation. So let's talk a little bit now about the politics of false equivalence. So despite these the facts, the political discourse in America has often sought to portray Antifa and right-wing extremists as equally dangerous, kind of like two sides of the same coin. This false equivalence has been particularly useful to politicians seeking to deflect attention from the rise of right-wing radicalization. During the Trump administration, the term Antifa became a rhetorical shield, a way to shift public scrutiny away from white nationalist violence and toward left-wing protest movements. And they do this by labeling Antifa as a terrorist organization, which it clearly is not. Trump and his allies framed anti-fascism itself as un-American, transforming opposition to racism into a perceived national threat. This political strategy did not reflect intelligence data or national security assessments. Rather, it reflected the power of narrative to distort public perception and basically stoke fear. The result has been a widespread misunderstanding. Americans are led to fear the unruly protester in black more than the ideologue with an assault rifle and a manifesto. Next, we'll talk a little bit about the true nature of threat. Well, to define a threat in national security terms, one must look at our intent and capability and also pattern. Antifa's intent is ideological resistance to fascism. Its capability is limited to local, sporadic activism and street-level protest. Its pattern of violence is statistically negligible at best. Right-wing supremacy groups, by contrast, possess a clear intent to intimidate, exclude, and at times exterminate marginalized populations. A capability rooted in networks, firearms, and training, and a pattern of mass violence that is both national and international in scope. Thus, the objective threat is not equivalent. It is asymmetrical. One movement breaks windows, the other massacres communities. So let me give a little bit of a counter argument and a rebuttal. Critics might argue that Antifa's confrontational tactics erode civil order and provoke violence escalation, and there is truth to that concern. Property destruction, mass protest, and militant imagery can alienate potential allies and give opponents political ammunition. Yet, even acknowledging these flaws, equating Antifa's sporadic property damage with racially motivated mass murder is intellectually dishonest at best. Both may be destructive, but only one poses as a sustained, organized, and deadly threat to the safety and stability of, again, our great nation. So here's the conclusion, the real danger. When we conflate protest with terrorism, we risk losing sight of what actually endangers the republic. Antifa may represent an inconvenient and sometimes unruly expression of resistance, but right-wing supremacy groups represent a systemic effort to roll back the progress of civil rights, multicultural democracy, and pluralism itself. The difference between the two is not merely quantitative, but moral. To confuse the two is to make or to mistake broken glass for broken lives. The real danger facing America is not the anger of anti-fascists shouting in the street. It is the quiet normalization of hatred marching under the banner of patriotism.